The member for Dawson.
Very much, Mr Speaker. The American poet Robert Frost is renowned for his work The Road Not Taken, which centres on a choice between two paths. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, it begins, with the poet noting he could not travel both and be one traveller. And so, despite eyeing off one path, he took the other, just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. When I came to this place, someone told me about two paths that lay ahead, the path of the poodle or the path of the mongrel. The poodles in politics, they said, do what they're told, get the accolades and end up sniffing the ministerial leather right up close. But nothing changes if it's left up to the political poodles. That's where the mongrels come in. Political mongrels might be mangy, they might growl when they're grumpy, and they might soil the carpet every so often, but they bark when needed and aren't afraid to nip issues in the bud when needed as well. They keep the poodles in the ministerial leather that they're accustomed to, but pretty much put in the never-to-be-promoted column. It doesn't need to be said that I took the path of the political mongrel. George Bernard Shaw's comparison of the reasonable man to the unreasonable man comes to mind when talking about political poodles and mongrels. The reasonable man adapts himself to the world, the unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. Political mongrels bring about change. Political mongrels get things done. For my electorate and my people, I've proudly been a political mongrel. As a result, we've seen some big things delivered for Dawson. The Mackay Ring Road at nearly $500 million is the biggest public infrastructure project built in the Mackay region. We've also secured funding for stage 2 of that road, which is the Mackay Port Access Road. Up in the Burdekin, the Horton River Bridge has been fixed and we're floodproofing that section of the Bruce Highway with $500 million. Mackay's northern entrance is being upgraded right now and the Walkerston Bypass is about to get going to the west of Mackay. We've seen the Sandy Gully Bridge upgraded on the Bruce Highway near Bowen, the upgrade of the southern approaches to Townsville, overtaking lanes and pavement improvement between Cuttable and Caelan, also near Bloomsbury, between Proserpine and Bowen, just north of Brandon and near Alligator Creek. That's just a fraction of the $2.5 billion worth of projects that has been or is being spent on the Bruce Highway in Dawson. We've also seen Urana Dam funded and about to be constructed, and now Hells Gates Dam also funded. Local roads and community facilities have also gotten a slice of the action. The new Proserpine Entertainment Centre has just been built, the Whitsunday Sports Park redeveloped and given a new clubhouse. There's a new Chute Harbour facilities. We've got a headspace for Mackay, now one in Proserpine too. There's the Mackay Aquatic and Recreation Centre, the redevelopment and extension of the CQ Rescue Helicopter Service hangar and headquarters, the Great Barrier Reef Cricket Arena being built at Harrop Park Country Club, Home Hill State High School's multi-purpose hall, the new Burdekin basketball courts, upgrade at Townsville's Brolga Park and at the Townsville Turf Club. I could go on, listing numerous community groups, sporting clubs and schools that have received new facilities, upgrades and extensions, courtesy of funding that I fought for, not to mention outcomes for industry sectors like agriculture, mining and tourism that I fought for, but I won't because we'd be here all day and the Parliament has other business to attend to. But I will for a moment dwell on the bigger achievements that, while benefiting Dawson, are broader than just my electorate. The Sugar Industry Code of Conduct is a key example of this. When cane farmers came to me with serious complaints of foreign-owned multinational monopoly milling companies trying to offer take-it-or-leave-it contracts that cut farmers out of having a say in the pricing of their product, I knew something had to be done. I do not want to see farmers or anyone else in this country basically becoming serfs to a foreign landlord. And so I fought alongside others for a Sugar Industry Code of Conduct, which set out the rules for fair agreements between farmers and the monopoly millers and established an umpire, an arbitration system, for disputes around those agreements. Likewise, with insurance premiums in North Queensland just going up year after year after year, in some cases by 1,000% over a 5-year period, I knew that there had to be government intervention. That's why I fought hard to get a Northern Australian reinsurance pool established to offset the rising reinsurance burden of cyclones and related flooding, and ultimately substantially bringing down insurance costs for North Queenslanders.
One of the greatest of achievements.
Thank you, Member for Kennedy. I've spoken a bit about the local deliverables in this regards, but I led the charge on a Fix the Bruce campaign back in 2013, and it resulted in $10 billion being set aside by the then Abbott Trust government for Bruce Highway projects. Against the extreme Green network, the Labor Party, Get Up and many left-wing media outlets, I fought for the Adani Carmichael mine, now operating under the name of Bravis. We fought against desperate but well-funded attempts to stop that mine, attempts that falsely tried to tout different entities as potential victims of that mine: the Great Barrier Reef, the fishing industry, the local Indigenous people who actually supported the mine, the black-throated finch, the ornamental snake, and the yakka skink. We were told that the mine wouldn't happen, that it was uneconomical, it was going to be completely automated, and all the rest of it. And yet last week I travelled out to the mine site where they're digging and exporting coal and employing miners, truck drivers and operators. The Great Barrier Reef is still here, as are the fish, the finches, the snakes and the skinks. And the local Indigenous community are getting jobs and contracts associated with the mine and the port. Now, I need to mention the Royal Commission into the banks. It was award-winning reporter Shari Markson who wrote about the then Prime Minister, quote, facing a backbench revolt led by Nationals MP George Christensen over the issue at the time, when the Coalition's numbers in Parliament were down as a result of the dual citizenship crisis. And veteran reporter Michelle Grattan, who noted, quote, the government was forced to drop its resistance when Nationals rebels threatened to revolt. Take a bow, Queensland Nationals backbenchers, Barry O'Sullivan, George Christensen and Lou O'Brien. You did everyone a service. Because I had been approached by many small businesses, farmers and homeowners in my electorate who had been done over by banks and insurers, I knew that the Royal Commission in the financial services sector needed to happen. Now, you only get a few shots at going against your own side on an issue like this, and so I didn't want to waste my vote on a do-nothing motion, but rather wait until a substantive bill came forward that could force the hand of the executive. And coming it was. Former Senator Barry O'Sullivan, former Senator John Wacker Williams, the member for Wide Bay, the member for Kennedy, and myself were making sure of it. And so they buckled, and the rest is history, or at least it should be. Sadly, legacy issues remain for banking victims, and I am still, even today, dealing with new victims of banking misconduct. The widespread misconduct of the banks meant less than 2% of submissions to the Royal Commission got to be heard. So the government announced that submitters could have their case heard by the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, or AFCA. But the problem is they will only hear cases from within the last 6 years. Many victims fall outside that timeframe. The sad reality is a bank can just decide still that they don't want a customer on their books anymore and call the loan in. No warning, despite the customer not missing a single repayment. Many customers in regional areas face this when the CBA bought out Bank West and when ANZ bought out Landmark. Family businesses, family farms were destroyed overnight after surviving good times and bad times for decades and generations. No warning, just the message from the top to the business bankers: raise their interest rates, call them in, do whatever you need to get them off the books. Was this process criminal? Perhaps. We may yet find out. The bank shouldn't breathe the proverbial sigh of relief just yet. But is the practice still continuing? Sadly, to say yes, it is. Up until very recently, the likes of Macquarie Bank would not acknowledge or accept that this had in fact happened to their business customers. Like one of my constituents, a long-standing small businesswoman with a very good reputation in her local area. Macquarie decided they wanted her off the books, and as a result she, like many others I know of, faced bullying and intimidation from their local business banker. Interest rates raised on the loan to tighten cash flow, pressured into signing blank discharge forms or agreeing to unfavourable terms as they were being threatened this was the only way out. The harassment was constant and unrelenting and brought a strong woman like my constituent to consider ending her life. Would Macquarie acknowledge this behaviour? Not on your life. The harassment and lies were often face-to-face or over the phone, so Macquarie were comfortable they could withstand a legal challenge. When will the banks just do what is right? How many Australians have to have their lives destroyed just because a bank can get away with it? The harassment and unconscionable behaviour of the banks has to stop. The Royal Commission just ripped the band-aid off the wound that is our current banking system. We need to keep the pressure on the banks to ensure the protection of families, retirees, farmers and small businesses continue and go further still. The government needs to strengthen the power of the watchdogs, ASIC and APRA, and needs to ensure that AFCA is truly independent and not just the rubber stamp of the banks that it currently is. The government also needs to establish the compensation scheme of last resort as soon as possible, and it needs to have broad coverage if it's going to have any effect. That is, it must cover all products and services that fall under AFCA's jurisdiction. Now, many of you have asked the question, why am I leaving? Well, the answer is varied. Firstly, there's family. Some of you know that my wife, April, and I now have a beautiful 20-month-old daughter by the name of Margaret Ann. Full of beans she is, and wakes up Mum every morning that I'm down here asking Daddy, so April can video call me to talk to her. I've become a forced fan of Cocomelon, Super Simple Songs and Frozen because of my little Gragret, as she calls herself. What you might not know, though, is the circumstances of her birth. In early 2020, April was overseas staying with family while I was off seeing Julian Assange in Belmarsh Prison in London and busy with about 4 weeks of parliamentary sittings, a couple of weeks of internal electorate travel and parliamentary committee work. We were supposed to meet up again in April, and then the borders slammed shut. Like many others, we became victims of pandemic policy, albeit policy that I supported at the time because it seemed like the common sense thing to do. We thought the borders would only be shut a while, but it went on and on and on. To cut a long story short, my daughter was born overseas in July 2020 without me there for it. Worse still, there were complications for my wife who had to have a caesarean and then suffered severe internal bleeding. At about 4 a.m, the surgeon attending to my wife phoned me to say the situation was very serious, and if there are things that I have to tell my wife, that now was the time to do so. You don't get a clearer, more sobering message from a doctor than that. She was then rushed into emergency surgery. That morning I had to front a meeting of local farmers and then a press conference, all the while not knowing whether my wife was alive or not. Thankfully she was, and the surgeons there saved her life. On that note, I am thankful for Senator Maurice Payne for what she did to get info via our embassy to the hospital and vice versa. In the preceding months, as April was recuperating, we worked on the process of reuniting. Without me pulling rank, it would have been in the papers if I tried to do so. Thankfully, we were reunited. So there's that. Then, here comes the hard bit, guys. There's this place. I actually don't like coming to Canberra anymore. The parliamentary processes to me seem so stale and staged. Question time's a farce where government backbenchers ask pointless questions written by someone else and opposition members ask pointless gotcha questions that never get answers. And the public hate the vitriol and behaviour displayed during question time. I'm guilty. I stand condemned as being part of that behaviour. The matter of public importance is nothing more than a sop to those who want to relive their high school or university debating club years. And votes and proceedings could just simply be dialed in. They're that predictable. We say something in favour of a government bill, the opposition say something against it, and we all vote for it or against it depending on what the party says. I mean, in the Labor Party you get expelled for doing anything else. On our side you just get ostracised. What happened to individuality in this place? What happened to critical thinking? What happened to true representation? As a nation, we bemoan the fact that most politicians are white-bread cookie-cutter replicas of one another, but on the other hand, we decry a spark of individuality as chaos, destabilisation and disunity, or at least the media does. We can't have it both ways. There needs to be greater room in this place for backbenchers to say what they really think publicly in this chamber and to vote accordingly. The notion of party discipline needs to give way to representation, just like it does in many other legislatures around the world. Otherwise, we run the risk of Parliament House degenerating into a sheltered workshop for people who can't think for themselves. So there's that. Then there's COVID. You've heard it before. We've blown up freedoms, bodily autonomy, medical privacy, human rights, community cohesion, and many businesses and jobs, all for a virus with a 0.27% infection fatality rate. It should never have happened, and yet some of it is still happening. We here could have and should have at least stopped the discrimination from happening by putting rules around access to the Australian Immunisation Register data, rules that said you can't use that data for the purposes of terminating someone's employment or discriminating against them in supplying a service. We didn't. It's not the only thing that I've disagreed with the government on. There's the net zero policy, which I vehemently disagree with on the basis that it's ultimately going to cost jobs, and probably jobs in my region. There's a digital identity bill which we're crafting that's being pushed by the elite globalist World Economic Forum. No one has ever approached me as a Member of Parliament and said they want the nation to adopt a digital identity system. But Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum have called for it, but we don't answer to them. Our democracy is one that should be from the ground up, the people up, not from the globalists down. So I'm not sure whether I've departed from the values of my party in government or the other way around. Perhaps it's a bit of both. And so continuing on as the member for Dawson, for the LNP or otherwise, when my values more and more differed from the government that I was part of, weighed heavily on me. I'm very fond of the reading meditations. I know you do, Member for Kennedy. I'm very fond of reading the meditations by the Roman Emperor philosopher Marcus Aurelius, and he wrote, "At some point you have to recognise what world it is you belong to, what power rules it, and from what source you spring, that there is a limit to the time assigned you, and if you don't use it to free yourself, it will be gone and will never return. So I'm freeing myself knowing that this is no longer the world I belong to." But as I take my leave, I want to share with my colleagues a list of things that matter to conservative and patriots, according to me. Strap yourself in. Some of these may be unpopular, not in keeping with the times or the way of the world, but to quote one of my favourite saints, St Athanasius, "If the world is against the truth, then I'm against the world." I begin with the most important matter of them all, life. The right to life is the most fundamental liberty of them all, and we should be acting to defend it. Freedom of speech is paramount for any democracy, including the speech we don't like. Efforts to ban free speech with political buzzwords like hate speech, vilification, disinformation and misinformation are harmful to democracy. Likewise, foreign-owned big tech oligarchies should not be allowed to censor political and philosophical discourse in this country. The legacy media is biased. It lies and it's become a cheer squad for big government and wokeism. We should call it out, but where it's privately owned, never seek to have government interfere with it. But taxpayers should not be funding a biased fake news media outlet. The ABC must be reformed. People should not be forced into any medical procedure under threat of losing their job, losing payments or any other form of restriction, coercion or duress. We should have, as I've said, as a federal government, acted on this. We should never sacrifice people's livelihoods, people's jobs, people's businesses and farms, our regions or our nation on the altar of the political religion that is man-made climate change. Net zero emissions will mean net zero jobs. The World Economic Forum, the United Nations and other globalist bodies should not dictate to Australia as to what laws we should have. Democracy in this country is from the bottom up, not top down. Australian citizens should not be locked up in foreign jail cells for breaking politically motivated laws in other countries that they didn't even set foot in, no matter how powerful that country is. We should pull out all stops to bring home Australians who are political prisoners, like Julian Assange and Cheng Lei. We should ban Communist China, its state-owned enterprises and state-linked enterprises from owning anything of strategic value in this country. That includes ports, farms, agribusiness, power and water utilities, the telecommunications sector, the resources sector and defence-related industries. We need a strong defence force, and we should support our veterans who have served this nation. We should make it a national policy to maintain and even subsidise a strong and resilient manufacturing sector and farming sector so that we are self-sufficient and economically sovereign. We should let kids be kids and not push woke trends and ideologies onto them. Parents who undertake their own childcare should be compensated to the same extent that those who utilise childcare services are. Parental alienation is a form of child abuse. It should be outlawed. Every child deserves a relationship with their mother and father, and the family law system should recognise this. Domestic violence is reprehensible, but masculinity is not toxic, and most men are not violent. We don't need to be welcome to our own country, and we should maintain a system whereby public services are not provided according to your race. Taxation is theft. The more money we allow working Australians to keep in their pockets, the better. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, corporate Australia has gone woke, if you hadn't noticed it. By and large, they are no friend of Conservatives, and we owe them no favours. Now, if my list of political ponderables seems dangerous to you, then beware. I'm about to go through a list of thank yous, which is always rife with danger due to the risk of leaving people out. If I leave people out, I am very, very sorry. Firstly, thank you to my wife Prill and my baby daughter Margaret, my dad, my late mother, my sister Kathleen, my brother Anthony, all of my wider supportive relatives in the Mackay region, like cousin Peter Christensen and relatives elsewhere who've had my back. To close friends, AJ Stebbins, Matt and Larissa Loveday and their children James and Ashley, Matt and Casey Fitzpatrick and their lovely family. To my good friend who's not here, Senator Matt Canavan, for all the support he's given me through our journey together. To the Deputy Prime Minister, a good mate even before I come to this place. To the member for White Bay, who's become a very good mate. The member for Hinkler, who's certainly helped me out a fair bit in my electorate and who's been a bit of a sounding board. The member for Wright, where are you, member for Wright? Down there, good on you. Bucko, you'll always be a mate. The Minister for Regional Health, who's delivered over and over again for us and always a good sounding board. To the member for Riverina, who we spent so much time together on those benches over there, causing trouble. Despite all the water that's gone under the bridge, I consider you a very, very good friend, Michael. To Senator McMahon, Senator McDonald, good friends all. The member for Leichhardt, who we fought hard in that insurance issue. The member for Capricornia, and member for Herbert, neighbours who've we've assisted each other on various different issues. To the Minister for Home Affairs, who's back in his office doing hard work. He's also been a good bloke to talk to. Senator Mackenzie for all of her support, and the Assistant Treasurer I should name as well for getting that insurance thing across the line. Senator Rennick, Senator Antic, who've been buddies in fighting against the vaccine mandates. And I also want to thank the member for Hughes, the member for Clark, the member for Mayo, the member for Kennedy, Senator Hanson and Senator Roberts. Now, some of you might think it's a bit weird to thank other people in other parties, and from the Nationals, particularly these independents, who we worry about, or the minor parties which we worry about. But I've always got on well with all of them. And as Bob says, and this is my homage to you, Bob, I do a good impression, may 1,000 blossoms bloom. To state MPs, Dale Last, Amanda Cam, Steve Andrews, Shane Knuth, thank you. I want to acknowledge Tony Abbott, Warren Truss, Deanne Kelly, the late Roger Kelly, Ray Braithwaite and Mavis, Ron Boswell, former Senator Nigel Scullion, Barry O'Sullivan, Peter Credlin, Rosemary and Ray Menkins, Ian McFarlane, Peter Slipper, Ewan Jones, Corey Bernardi, John Wacker-Williams, Ian and Leslie McDonald, Peter Lindsay, Ted Malone and Karen. A shout out to former Senator Bob Brown for his contribution at the last federal election. They say in this job, you're only as good as your staff, and I have some bloody good staff who've had to put up with a lot. So thank you to Shelley Argent, Megan Kerr, Dave Westman, Lauren Ballard, Beck Reid and Alicia Carroll, who were with me till the very end. But also thanks to Linus Bonanno, Dennis O'Reilly, James Moyes, Belinda Neiman, Brett Leach, Shannon Mapley, Sue Breen, Wendy Cumming, Danielle Nielsen, Nicole Batsloff, Ross Warwicker, Diane Hatfield, Cody Vella, Damien Tessman, Tamara Candy, Dominic McCarthy, Jess Dawes, Kathleen Agnew, Margie McLean, Mary Cornelius, Matt Delagan, Max Tomlinson, Ray Lloyd-Jones and Rebecca Chandler. Your work has been very much appreciated. Dawn Klebby, your son, and my late friend Martin Klebby, Dawn's daughters Alana and Anita, Jolyon and Enid Forsyth, Paul and Leanne Fordyce, Michael Jones, Jeff Bagley, Ken and Joyce Kelly, Doug and Kay Peterson, Chris Bonanno, Graham Cummings, Simon Viglianti, Jennifer Azzopardi, Jeff Cox, Dave Cox, Sophie and Lawson Cam, Shane Newell, Ari Oliver, Andrew Cripps, Stan Amero and Warwick Wright, Jewel and the late Jim Gist, Joe Moore, Laurie Nielsen, Bob Smith, Robin Halls, Cole Hoffmeyer, Cole Glover, Laurie Pinder, Joe and Jan Sybaris, Pam and Mike Farrell, Judy Davies, Richard Bernardo, Jack McLean, Ian and Rhonda Braithwaite, Peg and her daughter Melinda Holborn, John Goldston, Charlie and Jackie Camilleri, Dr Paul Joyce and wife Lenny, Gay Gillies and the late husband John, Ken and Joyce Kelly, Jason and Tracy Newitt, Tony Perner and his late wife Josie, Alan and Ethel Millington, Peter Ware and Trish Marlberg, pilots of mine, Bob and Helen Baker, Tony Large, Bruce and Helena Heddich from the Bowen Pub, the Larrikin, Ian Shield, Bob Smith, Bob Harris, John and Kylie Smith and daughter Natalie, Frosty and Heather McLean, Bill and Marg McLean, Les and Nadine Durnsford, Bob Morton, Barney Menzies, Tom and Jan Callow, Neville and Elvie Dickinson, Brian and Lena Martin, Kiara Ross, John and Bev Honeycomb, Pam and Neil Pratt, Peter and Lorraine Henderson, Don and Liz Hick, Mitch Clark, Peter Hall and the Hall family, Gary Spence, Larry Anthony, Ben Hindmarsh, Jeff McCormick, Lincoln Farlow, Paul Darazette, Alan Gascoigne, Terry Dennis, Gina Reinhardt and all the Liberal National Party and Team Dawson members and supporters along the way. That wasn't the full membership list, by the way, but I want to thank each and every one of them and all of the others that I have failed to mention. I'm sorry if I have failed to mention them. They've been of great help and I will always be thankful for them. To industry and community stalwarts, Paul Skembry, Kerry Latta, Alan Parker, Max and Margaret Menzel, Sharon Smallwood, Annie Judd, Tony Randall, Dr Peter Ridd, David Caracciolo, Greg Chappell, Keith Payne VC and wife Flo, Peter Shaw and Jason Sharam, Christine Keys and the Freedom Australia Mackay team, Margaret Shaw, Bernice and Peter Wright, Ian Rowan, Mike and Pam Farrell, Vic and Evelyn Vassallo, Dale Smith, Bruce Smith and the wider Smith family, Bill Brewer and Cole Mang. Thank you very much for all your support. To dearly departed supporters and families of those supporters, the late Jeff Walker, the late Jim Ward, the late Professor Bob Carter, the late Ursula Murray, the late Bill and Eileen Dykey and the late Jack Long. Thank you. Tishan Johnson, David Goodwin, David Pello, Warwick Marsh, Kurt Marburg, Dan Flynn, Wendy Francis. Thank you to my local mayors, Greg Williamson, Lynn McLaughlin, Jenny Hill, Andrew Wilcox, all the mayors past and the councillors past and present. Thank you for your support. And for spiritual support along the way, I want to particularly thank Reverend John McKim, Father Richard Martin, Father Mark Vidus, Father Bill Meyer, Bishop Keith Joseph, Bishop John Ford, Bishop Ian Woodman, Bishop David Chislett, and our unsung parliamentary chaplains, the Reverend Eric Burton, the Reverend Peter Rose, Gordon Matson Johnson and Lynn Dow. That point brings me to the one I want to thank the most, my God. A lot of people have verbaled me about my faith. It's there and it's strong, but I acknowledge always that I've not lived up to its standards. And that is the point of Christianity. None of us can live up to the standards set by the perfect man, Jesus Christ. We can aim to and we can aspire to. And when we fall, we seek forgiveness, we get up and we get on with it. I'm not a saint, far from it. I'm a miserable sinner. The prayer I have prayed the most, apart from the Lord's Prayer, is what's called the prayer of the heart or the Jesus Prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Despite being a miserable sinner, I give all glory of the past 11 years plus of federal parliamentary work, the 6 years plus of local government work, totalling less than a month shy of 18 years of service in elected office, all to my Lord God and Saviour Jesus Christ. And in doing so, I'm reminded of the verse from St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians that has been emblazoned on the bronze paperweight that has sat on my desk in my Parliament House office. Stand firm, it says, in bold letters, and underneath, be strong and immovable, always work enthusiastically for the Lord, for you know that nothing you do for the Lord is ever useless. And from knowing this, I know the path that I've taken, the path of the mongrel, has been worth it. Robert Frost finished his poem, The Road Not Taken, with these words, in which I finish my parliamentary contribution. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. Take care, and God bless.
Authorised by George Christensen, LMP Mackay.